he doesn't count in our conversation. So.
Good, we're good.
You're all set? All right, today is August 12th, 2008. We're sitting in the FFA barn. I'm sitting here with Timothy.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Oh, doing great today.
Great. Now, you're an agricultural teacher.
Yes.
For certain schools?
Southwestern High School.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I guess we'll start out with the easier question. So
Okay.
let's just do age and date of birth.
I'm 36 years old,
Okay.
born on September 30th, 1971.
Okay. Where were you born?
Harrisburg, Illinois. I grew up in the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois.
Really?
So Hardin County was the location that I lived.
Now, did you have a lot of immediate family around where you grew up, or?
Quite a bit. We farmed with my family farmed with my uncle, and then those two families raised cattle and horses growing up.
Okay. So, growing up on a farm, I'm sure you had lots of chores and...
Raising horses and cattle, we had about 500 acres that we dealt with between the two families in southern Illinois. Cleaning barns, that sort of thing. We raised quarter horses and Morgan horses, and then crossbred Angus cattle.
Oh, wow. Wow, so that's a lot of work.
Quite a bit.
So, what were your good chores?
Just cleaning stalls, exercising horses. It wasn't too bad at all. And then we also did gardening and that sort of thing. My mother would can all the everything that we get from the garden, and we had chickens just for the eggs.
Oh, wow.
All of those things that life on the farm's like.
Well, that's great. There has to be one chore out there that you just hated.
Cleaning stalls was not the most favorite thing in the world, especially if you have a horse in there for quite a long time. Then daily cleaning. Getting up before school, and then after school cleaning it again.
Yeah. Now, living on a farm, what about friends? Having friends over to the farm?
You didn't do a whole lot of sleepovers and stuff like that. You would have friends come. I used to make the joke that I wanted to live in town because those people got to we rode the bus for an hour, and living in the Shawnee National Forest, it was forest land all around us. So you were kind of excluded from people at times. But, occasionally birthdays, special events, people get to come over.
That's cool. Well, what was it like having kids from the town over, or were they mostly farm kids that were your friends?
Mostly farm kids that were friends. My dad was a Baptist minister, so, people from the church would come over and different things like that as well. But, a lot of them didn't understand, what it takes to, exercising horses or raising cattle, that sort of thing, or where their meat actually came from,
Do you have any funny stories about, showing people the cattle or horses?
Most of the funniest story I had was we had a lot of deer hunters in the area, and we actually had a calf shot one time because they had mistaken one of the calves that we raised because it was red for a deer, and they had shot it, and then they had to come up, and find the people that owned it and different things. But it was more with deer hunters and different people in the area, not realizing that the cattle and horses were running through as well.
That's wild. Now, as a child, what about organizations? Were you involved in 4-H or FFA?
I wasn't as involved in 4-H as a lot of my students are today, and then FFA when I was in high school was the main organization that I got involved with.
So what did you do in FFA? What was your project?
My projects in FFA were poultry production. We raised beef, the horses. I worked at a feed store as well, and then did communications and public speaking and stuff like that through the FFA.
Really good. Now, when you went to school, did you go to a school where most of the kids were rural kids? Or?
Yeah, it was a county-wide school actually in southern Illinois. So almost everyone there was pretty rural as far as attending the high school.
Now, I imagine that had been consolidated at one point from small...
The first school I went to, kindergarten through third grade. My kindergarten and first grade teacher was the same person in the same room, and then second and third grade was the same person in the same room type thing.
Wow.
And then it consolidated to a county-wide school when I was in fourth grade.
So how was that transition between third and
It was a
fourth
little
grade?
scary as a fourth grader because we went from this little bitty school to 3 classes of fourth grade and like 3 classes of fifth grade, and which is still small compared to a lot of other places because there were 70 in my graduating high school class, which is small, but for us that was huge because the building was actually K through 12 in one huge building, and so quite the change from the little bitty, school where my grandmother was my kindergarten and first grade teacher.
That's wild. Wow. So can you kind of explain what your family's farm looked like, or does still look like?
Well, it's not in existence anymore. My father has passed away, but my uncle still farms part of it. We basically raise cattle, cow-calf operation, where we would just, at weaning, the calves were sold to people that would either finish them out or use them from breeding. Crossbred Angus with Chianina, Hereford, different breeds. And then we raised horses. At our largest point, we had about 26 horses that we'd raise quarter horses and Morgans and sell the foals to either people that showed or different people that would use them for riding purposes as well. Chickens, just for eggs and the FFA projects. Raising like potatoes, the women in the family, kind of a southern Illinois, Kentucky type, they would all get together and slaughter the chickens and have a day where the kids would have to help. They canned together, so it was like homemade ketchup growing up versus, we always were like begging for our birthdays to have like, Kraft macaroni and cheese and stuff like that. Junk food was non-existent on the farm because we'd raise cattle, so you had steak, you would have canned vegetables, and stuff like that, but having like, pizza and junk food and stuff like that was more of a treat versus anything else.
Well, now you're an ag school teacher, so can you tell us what's the difference between your childhood and what you see in a lot of your students' childhood?
It's changed quite a bit. I mean, I've taught in the Chicago suburbs before in a lot of horticulture. I teach now in a rural area about 45 minutes north of St. Louis, and you see a lot of students that aren't exposed to the farm. I would say less than 40% of my students actually are from a farm, or a rural area even. They live in small towns. Their parents, some of our parents commute to St. Louis, but as far as farm families go, they're few and far between as far as in the area that I'm in. And the classes I had were more farm management, that sort of classes, and I teach like pre-veterinary studies, floral design, landscaping, a little bit more of a mix between the traditional and the urban agriculture.
Yeah, interesting. How did you get involved in becoming an ag teacher?
Never planned on it. When I went to college, I went to in FFA, I served as a state officer for FFA for a year. Ended up going to the University of Illinois with a major in international ag business and marketing. Decided to pick my teaching certificate up as well. Went ahead and student taught my senior year and totally loved teaching and everything. I also met a young lady who later became my wife, and so thought that was the more stable thing to do was teaching, so decided to teach agriculture instead of working in the business world.
Great. So, you said you teach a little bit of landscaping, some agribusiness, different things. Can you kind of give us a description of what those classes really are?
Well, there are several sequences in high school ag programs. The ag business program, we teach farm management. It also counts for consumer ed credit for graduation from high school. So you teach personal finance, we go over credit, taxes, that sort of thing. So whether they're operating a business or it's just their own personal finances, we go through those. In ag business management, we use agricultural examples. And so they practice, whether a horticulture business, farm business, whatever they're doing, they learn, different, tax principles, accounting principles, the basics, so that they can balance a checkbook at least when they graduate. Like in floral, I have a semester of just straight floral design. So I've had students go ahead and work through college, maybe in a floral shop as an assistant, that sort of thing as well. We have some veterinary classes. I teach small animal care and management. One of my students, that was my pre-veterinary is what we call them, went on to college and then is now in vet school in Scotland, finishing out her veterinary science degree. We have some natural resources and conservation, and I've had students go on to become like conservation officers, that sort of thing. But at the high school level, we just try to at my school at least, I try to offer quite a bit of diversity so that kids can figure out where their niche lies in agriculture.
Yeah. How does a kid get into the ag classes? I mean, are they a requirement or
not a requirement? They're an elective. They choose to get involved in. I'm also the CT director at the high school, so I manage all the career and technical education. So in the agriculture program, we have about 590 students at the high school I work at, 184 in an agriculture class, at least for a semester, and around 400 of the 590 are in a career and technical education class as well. So they just sign up for at least a semester as their elective. With a strong FFA chapter, then the students will come in because they want to become involved in different activities that they do.
Yeah. So do you have some kids that come in that have just absolutely no agricultural experience at all and they start really getting into it and pretty soon?
I do. I've had students that will come in and have no idea that, beef cattle produce hamburgers, and they're, you would think that at least they would learn that at home, and that bacon comes from, swine, and learn a lot about it and have gone on to agricultural careers. I had a young lady who actually grew up on a farm but never wanted to be part of the farm area. Went through my program, still said no to farm. I'm not going to study agriculture. After her freshman year in college, pre-med, she now switched to ag business management and switched universities because she finally realized the importance of agriculture versus some of the other things. And then I've had others that go through the program and go on, but at least come out with an appreciation for, life on the farm.
I'm sure you've got to have tons of stories from your classes.
We've made jokes, different students telling them, that grits come from the grits plant and stuff like that, and they'll believe us. Freshmen are somewhat gullible when they're uninformed about agriculture, but for the most part, things go well in the agriculture room.
That's great. Really good. I've talked to a couple students, or a couple of the FFA officers so far, and they've mentioned that they want to go into agricultural education, education field. And one of them actually mentioned that it's very difficult. Can you tell us kind of some of the difficult parts of it?
Well, a lot of times people think education in general, you work 9 months out of the year. The big thing in agricultural education is that it's a year-round job. Whether or not, I'm lucky enough that the school I work for pays me during the summer, but some schools don't necessarily offer them a contract that will cover all the things that they do. Because of the nature of agriculture, you're working through the summer as well. The other thing that you face is that I see is you're not only teaching the college-bound students and the honors kids, but you're also teaching the students involved in special education as well. And you may have as an elective both of those students in your classroom. So reaching all of those students at their level and having them understand the concepts that you're teaching is very difficult, because a lot of times in the academic programs they will divide those students out. And it's a lot easier, but when I've had the valedictorian sitting next to a student that could barely read before, wanting to learn about agriculture. So just the classroom management itself is difficult. There's a lot of job openings because I think a lot of times the teachers, sometimes teachers choose to go elsewhere just because there's less headaches. The FFA schedule, the contest schedule, all the things that FFA offer is wonderful for students, but sometimes it can be a little hard on the ag teacher and their families. I'm lucky enough, my wife is the daughter of an agriculture teacher, so she understands the time commitment that it takes.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So what do you do in your classroom to deal with the fact that you have such a big gap between, the valedictorian and the kid that can't barely read?
Repetition every once in a while. A lot of times I use multiple intelligences. I got my master's degree from Rockford University in teaching and a lot of different teaching strategies. My philosophy is that kids all learn and they're intelligent, maybe in just different ways. And so what I actually test all my students to see what intelligence, whether they're a visual learner or a verbal learner, bodily kinesthetic learner. My kids will go through and test them, and then I gear activities more toward how they learn so that no matter what content I'm covering, they have an ability to grasp it. And then I do extra activities. So like the valedictorian may finish the assignment and I give them more enrichment type activities, and then they also do peer tutoring for the students as they get it as well. So they all work together by the time the year's over.
That's great. Now, you've mentioned that you have to be very involved with the FFA and
Mm-hmm.
4-H sort of stuff. How is that on, what sorts of things are you doing as the teacher?
As a teacher, I have a lot of kids that are involved in FFA and 4-H. FFA is really interesting because it's intracurricular. We teach about FFA history in the classroom, and it's 1/3. You have FFA, you teach about agriculture, and then we have our SAE program, which is the record book program that students do. And all three of those things work together for a quality program. And so the neat thing about it is I'll teach about dairy products in class and how they process milk. And then my students will actually go to a contest, and we call them career development events. And it's preparing them for a career, and what we've learned in the classroom, the FFA will sponsor a contest that they'll go and test their knowledge so they can able to see defects, different things like that. So we have a meats career development event, an agronomy career development event. So it's all based on careers that they could do in agriculture, and it's what we're learning in the classroom as well. So it's just an extension for them to compete and to see how much they know compared to kids from other schools.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of hands-on reality learning.
Oh, definitely. You get in there, and I think even with my students, when I teach genetics, we raise rabbits at the school so that instead of just doing a Punnett square like they would in science class, we actually do the Punnett square, but we breed the rabbits at the school. The pre-veterinary students take care of them, and then we can set out the animals and show, well, here's a live Punnett square on the floor, with the squares drawn so the rabbits are in their spots, depending upon the genetics they express. And it gives the kids a lot more understanding of the world around them versus, just something on paper.
Yeah.
And a lot of students, especially those ones who may need a little bit extra boost, the honors kid can handle the paper very well, but sometimes those other students need a visual representation of what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Now, with the 4-H and FFA, you have kids that are choosing their own projects.
Right.
Do you have kids that choose these huge projects that actually make you learn?
Of course, I am not that knowledgeable growing up in the Shawnee National Forest about agronomy, so I'm always learning about, and now being in central Illinois, corn, soybeans, wheat. I didn't grow up on a grain production area, so I have students that actually help me manage. We have a 32-acre farm at the school that they manage as well. So I'm learning all the time about, planting ratios and populations and everything, because I was strictly horses, cattle, animals, and a little bit of forestry. But it's quite interesting. When I taught up by Chicago, I didn't know hardly anything about floral design. And then teaching up there in the suburbs, and floral design and landscaping was our big areas. I learned from other teachers, as well, so I can bring that into the program, in Southern Illinois as well.
Great. Being in Illinois and having you teach at multiple different schools in agriculture, what makes Illinois agriculture special?
I think Illinois agriculture is really special as far as education goes because Illinois is probably one of the leading ones nationally for curriculum that we use. The FK, Facilitating Coordination in Ag Education, working with the state, have developed curriculum that other states model afterwards. So when I said the 5 sequences, there's a program for agri-science, there's a program for horticulture, there's a program for ag business. All of these areas, ag mechanization and conservation, and there's actually curriculum developed. So any new teacher coming into agriculture can take that curriculum, and I use it probably about 60%. And then I add my own, taste to it and flavor to it. But you can come in and that curriculum is developed, and other states use that curriculum as well. Wow. So if they're a freshman at my school, if they're a freshman in the Chicago suburbs, they actually get, a similar curriculum for that.
So, what do you think the future of agriculture education in Illinois is going to be?
Definitely becoming more urban. When I was in class or as a student, I'd never really heard of floral design being offered at like small schools. It's definitely more urban. My students, we also look at going green, and the ecological impact that farming has as well. But the traditional is still there. Less people do it. But it's still the basic point that we use. We also look at marketing and how those products are marketed, and communications as well. But I think it's a bright future. I really think that Illinois agriculture is going to continue. I think we set an example, and my students are always like, and of course we are #1 in horseradish and pumpkin production, so if all else fails, Illinois' claim to fame is pumpkins and horseradish.
There you go. So, this is going to be an oral history interview, and it's going to be archived in the Illinois State Museum.
Okay.
One day down the road, maybe, one of your kids or great-great-grandkids could walk into the museum and see your interview. They could say, hey, look, there's great-grandpa Tim's interview up on the shelf there, I want to see that. And is there something you would like to put in here?
I would just say that I think my life was definitely different being involved in FFA. I never really thought that I would, I got to meet the original George Bush as president and travel, with FFA and do so much. And that's probably the reason why I teach so much, is because I want my students to get the same opportunities that I had. And I'm excited because by the end of the week, I'm going to be showing rabbits with my 5-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow.
And so she's coming for the first time to the fair, so that I really think it's important for them to understand the value of agriculture. And that's the one thing I want to impart upon, whether my students or not, is that they understand how important agriculture is, not just for the food on their table and their clothes on their back, but just in the economy in Illinois deals with agriculture.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Really nice to sit here and talk to you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.